And yes, we're talking about Halloween 3, the sequel.
The Season of the Witch.
The sequel to Halloween 1 and 2, because it's the continuing story of everyone's favorite, Michael Myers.
But it's not.
My favorite part is... Oh, it isn't? Wait.
No. Producer Erwin Yablans went crazy and said it would never work. Like, he just thought it was the worst idea in the world. Because they pretty much light Michael Myers on fire, and he walks through the hospital and falls right down. So he's dead at the end of part 2. So why Halloween 3, Season of the Witch?
Well, to circle back around, there was a Halloween movie that was called Halloween in 1978.
Cost $325 grand.
It's one of the most profitable independent films ever made. It came out on October 25th, 1978. I only know that because it's my birthday.
Ah,
I was
happy
born.
birthday.
Thank you. I was born before that, but it was the same day. And then Halloween 2 was a genuine sequel in that it continued the story. What year was that? 81?
I think it was 81, and they continued it the same night, which was actually kind of a cool idea, because it just continues the story, which is really cool. But we thought at the time, ended the story.
Right.
And it beefed up the gore because apparently Carpenter wanted to do what other sequels were doing, like the Friday the 13th ones. It was just to do sequels were not only new at that time, but to up the gore. That was the thing to do.
And it was the first movie is directed by John Carpenter.
Yes.
The second movie he was involved with, but it was directed by Rick Rosenthal.
Rick Rosenthal.
Right, right. And then they said, we're done with this series. But I guess because the franchise of calling a movie Halloween was so popular that John Carpenter, who was involved in Halloween 3, they decided instead of making Michael Myers be the focal point of all of the films, because they had him kill off in the second movie, that they were going to go in a different direction and start to make anthology movies. And this was the first one of those, Halloween 3. And I think the thought was they were going to do one of these every October.
Yes.
So there would have been, in 83, a Halloween 4, which would have been a completely different storyline, but just related to the holiday. And then 5 and 6 and so on. And
it's kind of a cool idea.
Definitely.
It's definitely a cool idea and a cool concept. They got Tommy Lee Wallace, who was the production designer in the original Halloween and The Fog. They actually offered him to direct 2.
Yes.
And he thought he just did not like the script at all.
Right.
So he actually directed 3. He also directed the It miniseries and the second vampire movie. Oh gosh, what is it called? Fright Night 2.
What ended up happening was, and this is, you got to put this into the context. So we're gonna say that this movie came out in 1982 a lot, because I think that's kind of key to sort of what the reaction was to this film. Nowadays, obviously, when a movie comes out, you can know just about anything about it. However, in 1982, you really didn't have that ability, and so I think genuinely what might have happened was a lot of fans of the first 2 films went to see this movie, and not a ridiculous assumption for them to make for calling a movie Halloween 3. They expected it to be Michael Myers again, and of course, it probably, as they were sitting there watching the movie, it becomes pretty evident pretty early on that not only is this not really a sequel, they don't even really make any reference to the events of that movie. In fact, they show a couple of scenes where in the background the original film is showing on a television. Well, fans of the Halloween movies would go to see this and be, I'm assuming they were very, very, and understandably, irate about that.
Yeah.
And the problem is that even though this is a pretty decent movie, and we'll go into the plot in a second, but the problem is that, you know, if you go to see anything expecting it to be something that you want to see, and then it's not that, you're not going to give the movie a chance. So I think a lot of people who went and saw this movie were just like, oh, it's terrible, it sucked, which it doesn't. It's not. It doesn't suck, and it's not terrible. But if you didn't go in with the expectation of knowing what it was going to be, you'd be pretty mad. The movie had a budget of, according to Wikipedia, so grain of salt. Let's put a grain of salt on that. Cost $2.5 million, which is actually not a huge budget even for 1982. But it's not a terrible budget for a horror movie made by a major studio, Universal Studios. And I think it made something like $15 million. So it was profitable.
Yeah.
But it was nowhere near as, I guess, profitable as they wanted it to be.
Yeah, I mean, even Erwin Yablans, again, the producer, said with the second movie, which he actually thought the script was very pedestrian, he said it did better business than he thought. And then when he found out they were doing 3 without Michael Myers, he thought that was like the worst idea ever.
And he said, he's on record as saying that, yes.
Yeah.
So basically because the reaction to this movie wasn't great, even though it was a profitable movie for Universal. Though in 1982 they might have had another movie that Universal was a little bit more concerned with the budget of. They did have a movie called what was it? E.T. That was the hugest movie ever made.
The extraterrestrial. I mean, the extraterrestrial.
But and that joke is from 1985, folks.
Yes, it is. Yes,
but my point being is that like because this movie didn't do as well as I guess they were hoping for. Although I don't know what they thought it was going to do anyway.
No.
But they immediately scrapped the idea of doing the anthology after this. So Universal never made another Halloween movie.
Nope.
And
it got kicked around to a lot of studios. And obviously they went on with the whole Michael Myers thing, and that series even splits off into what's known as the Thorn series.
There's
a producer's cut and a regular cut of 6, and the producer's cut was legendary.
Yes.
And then it got rebooted again where H2O came out and said ignore those other sequels, and then Resurrection, which is an awful, also directed by Rick Rosenthal, who did the second film. There's a lot of strange tie-ins, by the way, between 2 and 3. Dick Warlock, who's Michael Myers in the second film, is also one of the androids for Conal Cochran in Halloween 3.
We'll get to the androids.
Yes.
But yes. And by the way, with Part 4, which came out in 1988, it took 6 years to make another Halloween film. Meanwhile, Friday the 13th had a movie every year of the 80s except for one. And by the point that 1988 rolled around, Freddy Krueger was the big thing.
Yes, Freddy was new. He was a bad boy on the block.
But they knew whether their bread was buttered with 4 because they said, the subtitle was The Return of Michael Myers?
Yes.
And what was Part 5? Was that The Revenge of Michael Myers?
The Revenge of Michael Myers.
Yeah, they want you to know that Michael Myers was back. Kind of like with the Friday the 13th Part 5, where Jason's not really in it. It's like the ambulance driver did it. Spoiler alert.
And the 6th one was originally called The Origin of Michael Myers.
Yes.
But then it was changed to something else, which I'm not.
But they wanted to make sure that Mike Myers' name is in there.
Yeah, so it's got to be in all of them.
And Friday the 13th Part 5, and people were so furious that Jason's not really in it, that the 6th movie came out and they made sure that the title was going to be Jason Lives. Yes. So they want you to know what you're getting now, and now obviously with the internet you can look all this stuff up as I just said. But just a little bit of the business end of it. And what's some of the other connections between the original Halloweens and Halloween 3?
Again, Tommy Lee Wallace being the production designer on 1, offered 2 and thinking it was just so pedestrian, then offered 3. And one of the writers on it with Carpenter. Carpenter's also back, by the way. Carpenter, who directed the first one, co-produced with Deborah Hill the second one, and did the score for all of them. Again, John Carpenter does the score for the 3rd movie with Alan Howarth, and that's really, really cool. The scores are awesome for these movies. There's these synthesized 80s type of scores.
Yes.
And they're just a lot
No other connections, though, between the first 2 movies and this one?
Despite the fact that it's playing on television.
You're not getting what I'm going for.
Oh, wait. Tell me.
So whose voice is the operator of the phone company in Halloween 3, and whose voice is it that's telling the town that the Silver Shamrock factory is under curfew?
Very good, Jamie Lee Curtis.
Thank you.
And it's another tie-in with Carpenter because obviously he did Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis. They did Halloween 2, but the next film he did after that was The Fog, and the lead actor in that, who is the lead actor in this, Tom Atkins, who was a big Carpenter. He was in Escape from New York.
Yes.
Really good character actor, probably known the most in B-horror movie circles for Night of the Creeps. The good news is, your dates are here, girls. Bad news, they're dead.
Yeah.
It's kind of a cool, funky movie, and he plays a character who says, thrill me. He's a hard-drinking detective and really having a lot of fun. Tom Atkins is a fun actor. He's probably most known, and admittedly, he would say this, for playing Michael Hunsaker in Lethal Weapon, where he's really effective in a couple small scenes, a really good, solid character actor. In this one, having a really good time. Tom Atkins thought that the film shouldn't have been called Halloween 3. It should have been called Season of the Witch. And I understand why he's saying that, so to just get rid of the Halloween connection. But as you had brought up before, if it wasn't named Halloween 3, it wouldn't have gotten the attention that it got.
It's kind of weird because you wonder if they hadn't made that Halloween connection, would the movie have done better, or would it have even done less well? So it's kind of a weird thing because there's the opportunity to say, did calling it Halloween help it or hurt it? And I think that should have, instead of calling it Season of the Witch, if they wanted to keep that brand name, they could have maybe called it something like A Halloween Story or something. That's what they would do now.
Exactly.
Why don't we talk a little bit about the movie? So we discussed that Tom Atkins is in it.
Yes.
Playing a hard-drinking doctor.
And Stacey Nelkin, I think.
Stacey Nelkin.
Who's really hot, actually, and still looks good to this day.
She's very attractive. Roger Ebert gave this movie a bad review, as he usually did. Although he gave Halloween a great review.
A great review.
But Halloween 3, he didn't have much nice to say, but he did actually give her like a good review. Like if you ever read the review for Halloween 3, it's on Ebert's site.
He must have been single then and thought she was pretty.
Could be, but yeah, he definitely said that she was very appealing, and she is very appealing in the film. She plays the daughter of basically. So let's go into the plot a tiny bit. We're not going to go through the entire plot. It's a plot that sounds a lot crazier than it comes across when you're watching the movie. Yeah. So essentially, it's this company called Silver Shamrock,
run by Connell Cochran, Dan O'Herlihy, who you know is Greg in The Last Starfighter,
and he's also the old man in RoboCop. And they make Halloween masks. Yes. And it turns out that they are this, what do you call them? I guess a cult?
Yeah, the whole concept.
An Irish cult.
An Irish cult. And Dan O'Herlihy, who's the bad guy who reveals like the big master plan, is that it's a joke on the children. And basically it melts the kids' faces and like snakes will come out of this thing. And
this is how you, but you have to explain it. So, because it's going to sound crazier.
It's going to sound insane.
Right. So this company called Silver Shamrock that's in California.
In Santa Mira, by the way, which is the same town from the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Nice little Easter egg there.
They steal one of the rocks from Stonehenge.
Yes.
They don't they
never explain how all of a sudden this thing, like, it comes by in a news report real quick.
Yeah.
By the way, someone removed one of the things from Stonehenge because no one would have noticed that.
Right. They stole one of the stones from Stonehenge and somehow managed to get it from England over to California. And you know how they know that it's ridiculous? Because they actually, Dan O'Herlihy's character says something, oh, we had quite a time bringing it here. So they were trying to address that it was impossible for them to do that by just saying that they're acknowledging it. So it's almost like don't pay attention to the elephant in the room,
yeah.
but they did. So anyway, this company is making Halloween masks. They make, it's a jack-o'-lantern, a witch, and like a ghoul.
Yeah.
And they have this little thing on the back of them that's a computer chip. And as part of the computer chip, they're chiseling off pieces of Stonehenge and putting it into the computer. And then when you put the mask on and you're watching a commercial, the commercial activates the mask and it kills you, but it also somehow makes bugs and snakes come out of you.
Come out of you and kill the other people in the room, which happens to some unfortunate family in the movie.
Right. So, so basic, and that's not even that's about as nutty as it gets. But did I mention that this company that's druids or something,
yes.
Also build killer robots?
Yes, there are androids, and that's where Dick Warlock comes in. And Dick Warlock, who played Michael Myers in Halloween 2, you see him a few times. Actually, you also see, and you probably saw him too, as a young William Atherton from Ghostbusters and from Die Hard. Yeah. Is one of the robots.
He's like the jerk in those two movies.
Yes. And basically they wear suits and their hair is all perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And they're killing machines. They kill.
The movie for $2.5 million, which again, not a huge budget, but not a tiny budget for this type of a film, was the director of photography is a man named Dean Cundy. He had done movies before this, mostly B-type films.
And the original Halloween and Halloween 2.
So it had a little bit of continuity in that respect as well. But he went on to have like this massive career. He did almost every Robert Zemeckis film.
He did Back to the Future.
All three Back to the Futures, which are great-looking films. He did Jurassic Park. I mean, if you look at his filmography, it's interesting because it is like kind of schlocky horror films. And then he slowly built up to like major A-list,
big budget stuff,
massive stuff. The movie is beautiful to look at. It's a really, really well shot film, and I know that doesn't make it sound like much, but if you just ever do watch the movie, pay attention to just how good the cinematography is, the framing, the way the lighting works. Everything is just on a technical level. This is a great movie. Friday the 13th movies are very schlocky and kind of like really low rent. I don't think that they're terribly made, but compared to this looks like a slick, very high-tech movie, which it should because it's kind of a high-tech movie.
Yes.
But yeah, it's interesting that there's a movie that combines Stonehenge, Halloween, killer robots,
and masked. And the big thing of it, like Silver Shamrock, it's a commercial that comes on and says 10 more days till Halloween, 9 more days. They're just constantly counting down. And Tommy Lee Wallace, by the way, is the voice of the guy who does the commercial.
Yes, you've heard the Silver Shamrock theme probably, even if you have never seen the movie.
Like a million times.
It's the theme. It's the music from London Bridge is Falling Down.
Yeah.
But yeah, also, so when you wear the mask with this thing on it, they tell you on Halloween evening at 9 o'clock they're going to have a giveaway
After a showing of Halloween,
yes.
by the way.
And then so basically the bad guy's plan is that all these children are going to be wearing the mask, and it's going to kill millions of kids.
Because children, the biggest joke is on children. It's a Celtic thing. When it ran, the town ran with, they talk about Samhain in the tradition, and the town ran with blood. I mean, he goes on this whole thing
it's crazy.
Early about like that the planets decide all this. There's that so that's kind of like, well, what the fuck, but.
So it's a horror movie that also has like a James Bond theme, because that guy actually has the James Bond speech in the movie, basically, where he unveils the entire plan. He even has Tom Atkins' character tied up to a chair, and he's basically explaining
it to him.
You know how and it's become a cliche, like that Bond always gets to escape because they just tie him up and they leave him someplace. Well, they tie him up and they leave Tom Atkins to deal with this. But,
and that's a problem I have too. They tie up Stacey Nelkin and leave her there, and Tom Atkins finds her, and then one of the big, spoiler alert, things at the end is that after he's gotten some payback, and I won't tell you exactly how against these guys, all of a sudden she starts attacking him, and we see that she was kidnapped, and they made her into an android, which makes you wonder, okay, well, it's a great little twist, but why did she go along with him destroying and killing? And then all of a sudden, last minute, she's like...
Funny you should ask. There is a theory online that's a fan theory, and it actually isn't completely ridiculous. So basically, what starts the plot in motion is a man working at the factory, like he sells masks, escapes, and they kill him. And
he gives out the warning, they're going to kill us all, and he has a mask in his hand.
Right, and that's how Tom Atkins gets brought into it, because he works at the hospital as a doctor.
Yeah.
And then the next day, the daughter comes, the man's daughter. Now, the theory is that she's an android at the beginning of the movie. She's an android the whole film, and that's what brings...
Ooh.
So, I mean, if you think about it, it actually kind of makes a little bit of sense. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily what the intention is, but if you ever do watch the movie, try to think of her and see her as if she was an android from the beginning of the movie.
And it certainly explains some of her acting choices. Yeah. She looks a little spacey. She has a look...
I think
her eyes. That's a little. It's an interesting.
Yeah, she has like really big, like kind of doe eyes. I like her a lot in this movie. I think she's really effective. Tom Atkins is great. He's just a very, very super likable guy, and he only got to really star in movies that were like this or Night of the Creeps, and generally, like Darren said,
a lot of Carpenter stuff.
The stuff they might even be best known for are the A-list type movies he made, but he was never...
Big on the Rockford Files.
Yes. I don't think he was ever the star of an A-list movie, although I guess this is almost an A movie. I mean, it was a major studio release, but yeah. He does a lot of conventions now, but... one of the things that really...
in Pittsburgh, still does theater.
Yes.
Apparently a great guy to meet. And
seems like he'd be a nice guy.
Yeah, he's still got this... He's got a wonderful following. And the thing is, he's a really good actor. It's almost like he's one of those actors that, he's better... He makes the material better or believable. He's quite believable.
He's very grounded in this movie. He doesn't play it over the top ever.
No.
It's a very solid performance. He's a good actor, and he is one of those guys, kind of like Tom Savini or Bruce Campbell, who always will have a pretty big line at any horror conventions because people just like the guy. Yeah. And a lot of it's because of this movie, because even though, as we said at the beginning, this movie didn't do very well, and it was very disliked for a very long time, it slowly but surely...
And they were depressed.
Has built up a really good following. And in my opinion, it's easily the best Halloween movie in the series, even though, again, it has to have a little asterisk next to it because it's not really... in the canon. Okay, we're gonna get into a little bit of a spoiler here because you got to talk about the ending.
The ending really sets this movie. I think makes this movie fantastic.
It's a dark ending, but it doesn't make 100% sense. Okay, so as we said, there's going to be this contest that's going to be on television at 9 o'clock at night,
and it's going to melt the kids' faces
and turn them into bugs. Tom Atkins escapes the factory.
Fights with the android girl whose hand attacks him.
Stacey Nelkin robot.
Her head off and stuff.
Yeah. He gets to a gas station, the same gas station from the beginning of the movie.
Yes, where the same gas attendant.
The same gas station attendant. And even, you can hear, and it's like, I noticed stuff like this a little bit, like they obviously ADR'd, like they added a line in afterwards where they're like, hey, didn't I see you somewhere before? So I don't think he said that on set. I think they added it. Well, anyway, so Tom Atkins, here's my question. Who is he talking to on the phone at the end?
Yeah, he gets on the phone to talk, and you're thinking to myself, how do you get on the phone to talk to someone who runs commercials on TV?
Yeah, he basically calls television.
Yeah, he calls television.
They don't really explain. So he's on the phone, and it's getting to be just about 9 o'clock, and there's a television in the gas station, like in the office of the gas station, and he's saying you got to turn off these commercials. They're going to kill people.
While there's kids
and they're actually kids watching the TV.
So it's about to happen.
They start changing the channels, and you see we interrupt this program. So he managed to somehow succeed to get almost all of the channels off, except for one, and the commercial's still running at the end. And it's just Tom Atkins screaming to turn it off and to stop.
Stop! Stop! And it keeps cutting back to the TV and him.
Yeah.
And he's getting more desperate, and that ending in his final stop is fantastic.
Yeah, it's echoey.
And it gets you at the end. Like, it really,
It's a good... Ooh. It's one of the best shocky, kind of scary endings that I can remember. I think that now is very well embraced. I don't know at the time if people like that ending. Because it's not a happy ending, because obviously, even though they stopped a bunch of children from being killed, there's still going to be a ton of people dead at the end of the movie because the commercial's still running.
Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!